Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Classroom to Corner Office Career Talks with Chris. Today, I am joined by Rob, who is a small business sales manager, um, currently working within, we'll say, the energy industry, and has a career path that may be a bit unique to others that we've heard from in the past. So, definitely interested to hear what Rob has to say about blazing new trails and
Yeah.
figuring out how to make it work. So thanks, Rob, again for taking time
Yep.
to be here with me
Yep. No
today.
problem, Chris.
Yeah. So I kind of maybe didn't bury the lead, but maybe put the lead at the top half of the first page here. While I would say your career right now in sales and small business sales is, I would say, relatively early from your larger career journey.
Mhm.
You did start out in higher education. So
Yep.
I'll just start out just to say, like, how did that transition occur for you? And,
Yep.
what have you found rewarding and valuable within that transition that you think is helpful for people to hear?
Yeah. I think, for me, it was a real eye-opening experience. I'm a big Steve Jobs fan, as you can see him over my head here. And I think back to a Stanford speech and said that the most humbling thing that ever happened to him was when he got fired from Apple. I worked at a small Catholic university for 20 years, thought that's where I was going to be and stay throughout my career. I had no intentions of leaving, and others had a different idea and different path. So I found myself looking for a new opportunity. And I remember talking to students all the time when I was in student development saying, you can't always take what you think is going to be the best job. Like you're not going to walk out of college and get the job you want and not be afraid to, start at the bottom. And I took a job, I had a master's degree and took a job working with college students, making $12 an hour, knocking doors, residential doors on a daily basis. Not a fun job by any means, but it was nice not to have any responsibility besides knocking doors and talking to people. And it has led into a very lucrative career for me. And now I'm seen as one of the experts in the area, and for the company. So I think that's probably my biggest advice to a college student or current recent grad is that don't be afraid to start at the bottom, because sometimes you have to show your worth, and you have to show what you're able to do and what you're able to get done. And sometimes a resume can't do that, and sometimes you're not going to be equipped with the resume to get you the job that you really might want to have. So, don't be afraid to work your way up.
Yeah, I think it's definitely, great advice is, whatever that career journey and that career path looks like, develop a plan, figure out how to implement it and be willing, right, to learn in those entry level roles that you can build up to. So
Yeah.
transitioning into sales,
Yeah.
talked a lot about transferable skills and what
Yeah.
that looks like. So what did you take away from your higher ed experience that you
Yeah.
think helped translate into being an effective salesperson?
Yeah. For me, it really was thinking back to what I did every day was really sales, right? Like whether I was talking to a group of parents, telling them about the university, or talking to student leaders about a policy change that we wanted to implement, I was basically selling it to them. I never really looked at it that way. It wasn't selling a tangible product, but at the end of the day, I was literally selling something to them. And really the bigger picture, it's about building a relationship, being able to talk to someone, being able to interact with someone, getting someone to trust you quickly, and getting them to buy into what you're talking about. And so, I was able to take those skills that I used all 20 years in higher ed and apply them out in the field where I was starting to hit goals every week and, moving pretty quick. I only did that door to door job for about 8 months before I got promoted into my first role, which was trainer. And then I got it promoted again another 4 months, looking at account management. And so it was really just this, you know, not afraid to take the bull by the horns and just make the most of every day. I didn't think I'd be at the company for 8 years. I just celebrated my 8 year anniversary. It was just a fill gap. I was going to go back to higher ed, and then started realizing that corporate America is a little bit more lucrative than higher education is.
All right. I mean, I guess amen to that. Having worked in higher education for pretty much my whole
Yeah.
professional career, right? You know what you're getting into, and when you stay
Yeah.
in what that reality is. So I can definitely understand understand that thought and
Yeah.
mentality. So a transition into corporate America. What were some
Yeah.
of those challenges that maybe early on you had to adjust to, and how
Yeah.
did you find yourself functioning in the
Mhm.
day to day, which was, I'm sure, a totally different maybe not mentality, but the application of that mentality.
Yeah, I mean, going from an area where you're on call pretty much all the time to an area where you literally worked 8 hours a day, and having a really strong work-life balance, I learned quickly how important it was. And I think back to the 20 years that I didn't have it. So that's another piece of advice is making sure you have that good work-life balance and can be the best of both good best employee and a best family person too, right? Best person, friend, best husband, best wife. That's important as well. And I think for me, what really scared me was when I was asked to lead a team. My first 2 years, I was just an individual contributor, just worried about myself. But then they asked me to lead a team, and I'm like, I have no idea how to lead adults, right? I know how idea. I had one employee, I think, at one point that was a professional staff member. Everyone else was always students, 18 to 21 years old. And I called a former mentor of mine, and he told me sometimes you just have to close your eyes and jump. You're not going to grow if you stay in your comfort zone. You're not going to get better if you stay in that zone of comfort. And so I took the leap and I applied a lot of the techniques that I used in higher education. I found it that I've spent a lot of time just caring for my staff, giving them a voice, listening to them, making sure they knew they were a person and not just a number, including them on decision making, making sure they were part of the process. They felt empowered, just like I did with students. And I found very quickly that I think what was really eye opening for me was during COVID. We had two separate sales teams. I had half the team, and another supervisor had another half. And my team was able to sustain their sales numbers throughout COVID, and the other team did not. And a lot of that was because they felt empowered, they felt part of the process, they were bought in. And I'm a very non-traditional sales manager. People will tell you that I don't lead a sales team like most people do. It's about effort for me, not necessarily about results. I have a sales rep now who is in the bottom third of my team, but he puts in more effort than anyone else on the team. And as long as he puts that effort in, he'll have a job. And I think that goes a long way.
Yeah, you talk about that effort, right? Being in sales, right? We can talk all day about sales techniques and sales strategies, but as you have demonstrated, and as I think you seem to instill in your team, you just have to go out there and do it. You have to learn from the bad, implement that for
Yeah,
later on, and you have to live the failure, right? And move
yeah,
past the failures. So I think that's great. You talked about building a team.
yeah,
Part of being a hiring manager, being roles where you're hiring others is you have to review resumes, application materials. So you talked a little bit earlier about some initiative, right? But
yeah.
what do you think within those application materials help someone stand out when they're trying to maybe just get their foot in the door with an entry level position?
Yeah, I think for one, in today's world, don't forget the cover letter. Um, if someone applies for a sales role with me and they don't write a cover letter, I don't put them at the top of the pile. I'm not saying I'm not going to look at them, but they're not at the top. You didn't put that and take the initiative to write a customized cover letter to show me what your skills are. And to me, that's really the selling point. Your resume is just a snapshot, but you can really highlight in a cover letter where you've taken initiative, where you've taken maybe on a project that wasn't in your wheelhouse, or you volunteered to do something to fix something. For me, showing effort, work ethic, initiative out outpaces any kind of skill you put on a resume. Because I can teach you skill, I can teach you how to sell, I can teach you about the industry. I can't teach you how to work hard, and I can't teach you how to take initiative. And I think, in today's society, when the job market's not the best, right?
Mhm.
It's very competitive. You have to stand out somehow, and you can really stand out by showing that you're willing to take a team to the next level, take a company to the next level, and that initiative and work ethic for me is by far the most important part of hiring someone. I'll hire someone with no sales experience and a ton of work ethic and initiative taken.
That speaks volumes, right? And how do you translate to a resume? Have some demonstrated outcomes of what you
Yep.
have done. Even if you think that little thing that you did in college, that small project that you helped lead, right? That shows the initiative that you're looking for.
Yeah, and I think even looking back to my college career, I started there in security, And something I was doing was I was programming. I had people bring people in. I took initiative to bring programming to campus as a security officer, making minimum wage. And the vice president at the time called me in and said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I just feel like there's a void, and I can fill it, and I'm doing it." And that's what led me to my next position was just taking that initiative and someone noticing. I think too, and I don't like getting political, and I'm not going to get political, but Barack Obama gave a speech or an interview not too long ago, and someone asked him, "What advice would you give a recent college graduate?" And he said, "Learn to get things done." And it's the same thing, right? It's the work ethic. Learn to get something done and show it. Don't be afraid of it. Even hiring now and talking to new employees, I tell them, if you see a problem, go fix it. Go engage the people that it affects and fix it. Find a solution. And I think that by far will get you to move faster in a company than anything else you can provide skill wise that you've learned in school. What did you do? What did you get done? Did you lead did you lead your athletic team? Were you an RA and you took initiative to improve the residence hall? Did you start your own club, an organization? Like those things that people don't think about showing initiative, that's all an example of that, right? Like, I think of students who came in and started a new club or organization. That's initiative. They saw something that they thought would be fill a void, and they acted on it. So just think broadly and try to show that initiative as the best you can.
Yeah, you talked a little bit about, being a non-traditional manager
Mhm.
within sales. I'm sure that also started with maybe some non-traditional strategies as a salesperson. Can you talk a little about what that may have been and what that's grown
Yeah.
into as far as how you train people to be effective?
Yeah. I don't believe in sales pitches. I've had people come in and say, "I need a sales pitch." I'm like, "Well, you're not going to get one from me." Because to me, that's salesy. I want you to go out and build a relationship. And my goal is to leave an interaction with a customer that they know more than they did before I walked on their door, right? If I take time to educate them what I'm selling and let them know exactly what it is, and they don't necessarily buy from me now, but they learn something, when they're shopping, who do you think they're going to call? Right? They're going to call the person who wasn't over the top pushy, who just wanted to make sure they learned something new, making sure that they understood what we were doing. And I was selling a commodity, right? It wasn't a product, and that's
Hmm.
even harder to sell. Like I'm not exchanging a product for you, but to get people to understand what it is the commodity is, why you're selling it to them, and them to be a more informed consumer, you're going to win every time. You're going to walk away a winner every single time because you're taking the time to educate that customer, right? And that's my non-traditional piece, like
Yeah.
educate the customer first, sell them second. And in all honesty, if you do it the right way, the customer will sell themselves, right? If you're asking the right questions and leading them down the path, guess what they're going to do? They're going to realize themselves that they need your product,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Without you ever giving a sales pitch,
Yeah. You lead them down the
right?
path and they just realize this is the best
Um,
option.
yeah,
Mm.
ask the questions, right? Like people like, I don't want to challenge people. You don't have to challenge them. Just lead them in the way you want them to go. You control the conversation, but let them lead the conversation.
Yeah. And I know from working with you and just knowing you as a person that, you are very analytical. You're very data driven. You like
Yeah.
statistics. So, not just maybe how you use this in your daily life, but
Yeah.
how can students or just people that are trying to find that next step, right? What are some ways that they can show that initiative in data driven decision making that will help
Yeah.
them stand out?
Yeah. Kind of give an example. I like talking in an example a lot because I think it makes it a little bit easier to understand. So when I was started in account management, when they did this process where they were reaching out and trying to renew customers early, and within the first 2 or 3 weeks of the job, I looked to the manager and said, "Is this working?" And they're like, "Well, what do you mean it's working?" I'm like, "Yeah, but do we have any data to show that it's working? Like, what's the increased renewal rate? Are we seeing an increase? Like, how is this working or not?" And they didn't know the answer to that question, and so I just started digging into it. I started looking at past numbers and looking at renewal numbers since they implemented the process, and came up with the fact saying, "Yeah, it's working. But I think we can improve it and get it to make it better." I think not being afraid of the data is first and foremost probably the best advice, and to use the data. right? Don't be afraid not to use it. I recently just restructured my entire team, and it was a big change. And I knew I wanted to do it probably the week 2 of my new role, where I'm overseeing this entire department. But I waited until I had the concrete facts to put the proposal together and present it to leadership. Right? I didn't just go to leadership and say, "I have this idea. This is what I want to do." I made sure that my presentation was solid, that I had data in the presentation so they could see what was driving my decision. And I literally walked out of a vice president and senior vice president's office and had approval before I walked out. And so if you do your homework and you put everything in a presentation that needs to be there, it may not be that easy, right? You may not walk out with the answer right away, but you're going to be seen as someone who takes things seriously, who has a strategy in mind, who makes decisions based off thought and analytical thought, right? Not just, hey, I think this is a good idea, let's do it.
In
Well,
theory, this should
no,
work.
yeah, but and then some of that's not bad, right? I
Right.
think some of that you have to have, but you know, taking the time to really dig in and not being afraid to try something. I've done some very unconventional things. I went to a bar association meeting and had a table set up to try to sell, bar owners commodity. And it worked. I had some good conversations, but everyone was intoxicated and we really couldn't do much business, right? And so, in theory, it probably wasn't the best decision, but it was something I was willing to try and throw out there and see if it will work. And so, I think, not being going back to that initiative piece, not being afraid to put yourself out there,
Yeah.
right?
And,
You
and
can't be
being
so. Go on.
No, I was just gonna say being data driven is something I try to preach in the classroom when I'm working with students. They're developing their resumes. Hey, show some measurable outcomes, and I think that's part of kind of what you get at and what you put into practice is if you're thinking like that on your resume, you're showing somebody who's going to be looking at it that not only can I show these outcomes, but I've actually taken time to dive into this information.
Yep. Yep. And I think that's key. And rely on the professionals. You don't have to do the data analytics. You know what I mean? Go to the department that's doing it and say, I need to have this data. And do you mind giving me some analysis around it too? Or this is the problem I'm trying to solve. Am I going down the right track? Could you give me some data to show it? I mean, you don't have to do the data analysis yourself. Let the professional data analyst give it to you, right? They're dying. Trust me, they're dying to show their worth. And if they can give you what you need and you can get a project through, they're going to support you and they're going to help you get it there. And so using the professionals, I didn't do this for a long time. I was the type of person who always felt like I can do it myself better. I can look it up on the internet and get the information. Not anymore. I rely on legal counsel. I rely on accounting. I rely on data science. Like I use the professionals that are doing it every day to give me the information I need to make the best decision and move forward.
Yeah, and you talked about, using this information to go in and pitch an idea, right? A
Mhm.
thought, a project, a proposal, whatever it is, all said and done. When you're in those rooms and you are making those presentations, you have all of your data and your charts, and this is the plan, this is the strategy, this is the potential payoffs. What are some strategies and skills that you put into action while making those presentations that would be helpful for college students or others to practice, really practice,
Yeah.
because that's especially if you want to climb the ladder in any company, you have to be willing to go in front of people and have those conversations. So, what are your strategies and what are some things that you do maybe to motivate yourself in order to perform?
Keep it simple. Don't get so detailed in the presentation and in your verbal presentation that the end result gets lost. Right. I think it's very easy to talk yourself out of getting a proposal approved, right? Just like you can talk yourself out of winning a sale. Keep it simple, stick to the facts, bullet point it as much as you can, and keep your presentation short and let them ask you the questions they need to hear to make sure they are comfortable making the decision. Again, I can go in and present for 2 hours on a project and that I want to get past, but is that going to be worthy when a senior vice president has other things they need to do? No, I need to present in 20 minutes and give them the other 40 minutes to ask me the questions that they need clarification on. I don't need to go in how everything's going to work. I need to give them the big picture, the overview. and let them ask the questions they need to know, because you might be talking for 40 minutes and not even give them the information they need. Whereas if you plan your presentation for half the meeting and give them the other half, you're going to walk out of there with their questions being answered.
Yeah, and that reminds me of somebody who at the time was not, but is now a lawyer, and ironically said, if you're explaining, you're losing, right? And I think
Yep.
this goes to show if you're doing too much, you're
Yep.
probably not winning, whatever it is you're doing.
And not to lead into the conversation later, but there are tools today. AI is a great source, right? I use it every day in my life, in my work life. I will write something and I put it in AI and say, make this understandable by a fourth grader, right? And
Good.
they'll spit out something else that kind of dumbs it down or makes it simple. And I don't necessarily just cut and paste it, but I kind of incorporate it in. And I think today we're afraid of AI. We're afraid of what it's going to do. I think something I've learned too is that we become very territorial, and we're afraid of making ourselves obsolete, right? And so you'll sit and do something the same way every single day, no matter how painstaking it is, and never find a different way to do it because you feel that's job security, right? But what you don't realize is that if you find a new way to do it and you become more efficient, you're going to have more opportunity because you're going to be making other processes more efficient, right? And so don't get so into your world. I did this in higher ed. I mean, I did a lot of things that I probably should have never done. Not bad things, but just I had a good skill set, right? And so I would just pick up this project and run it. I would do this and it became mine. And I had all these projects that were mine. And when I left, still today, I just had a meeting with the current president of the university. 8 years later, I'm still coming up in meetings. How did Rob do it? What was he doing that he was able to do all of this and we can't even do 1/4 of it?
Yeah.
And that wasn't good for me. That gave me horrible work-life balance. I had a great time. I enjoyed it, but you know, thinking too through sustainability, right? Like succession planning. I left the university, and for 6 months they were lost. Right? I'm sure you were there. You were
I
probably
was
in some of
there.
those
I
meetings.
can
Who
attest.
did that? Rob. Who did
Yeah.
that? Rob. Who did that? Rob. Right? And that's not good for the institution itself, right? And so I've created in my team. I've took the initiative, and everything my sales team uses tech wise, I've created for them. I've created a Power App. Power automates everything they do is automated, and I'm currently in the process of handing it off to the right team because I want to make sure it stays there whenever I move on to my next role. And I also don't want that to hold me back, right? Because if I'm the one running all of that, I've created and ran it all, then when I apply for another opportunity, there may be like, we can't lose Rob in this opportunity because he's the one that made all that. He runs all that. And so, be careful too with initiative, right? That you're not taking it on, putting it on your plate, but making sure that you're putting it in the right places so that it becomes institutionalized and sustainable. And don't be afraid to train your replacement, right?
Ooh, what
Don't
that's a quote right there.
right? Don't be afraid to train your replacement, because I was that way, right? And Chris, I was very guarded with
Mhm.
how I did things, and I wouldn't share how I did things. And now I'm not that way. My I have a supervisor under me who every day I'm preparing to take my position. Every single day I'm giving her a new task, asking her to do something else. And again, she knows my plan, right? I'm very open. I'm transparent with my employees. They know why I'm doing it. And, it's to get her ready to step into the role. I'm not going to be a sales manager forever. I don't love sales. I love developing people and fixing processes. That's where my true passion is. But, I'll do it the best I can while I'm doing it,
Yeah.
and make sure that I'm preparing the team to succeed when I move on to my next move.
And you speak right to the career and self-development that you've experienced and that you try to impart
Yep.
on those that you work with. I think that's great, right? Because not everyone gets that
Yep.
leadership and that mentality from a
No.
supervisor. So that's
No.
definitely a valuable tool, not only for you, but for those that work with you.
Yeah. And it
Uh,
makes them feel valued, right? Like if your boss is investing in you and making you feel valued, are you going to do a better job for them? You are, right? Because they're investing in you, you're going to invest for them. And so it's like that relationship building, right?
Mhm.
Building a relationship that will get your team to overperform. I mean, I took culture surveys from the 20th percentile to the 90th percentile in 1 year. That doesn't happen lightly, right? It takes a lot of effort and a lot of initiative to do it. And again, I'm proud of that. I'm proud of being able to say I did that. And it was a lot of getting to know people, spending time understanding what makes them tick, right? What drives them, what motivates them, making them part of the process, not changing a policy or procedure without involving them. I rewrote a commission plan. They had a role in it. They told me what they'd like to see, took pieces from everyone and kind of threw it together and made it. It wasn't just me sitting in a room doing it. And I think sometimes leaders are afraid to do that, because then they're going to look like they're not able to do it themselves. Whereas it's the opposite. If you're able to develop a team and build a team, people are going to want to work for you. People are going to envy not being able to work for you, and they're going to wonder what's going on.
Yeah. And for
So,
those listening, right, we just heard a demonstrated measurable outcome that was just it came off just like it was, you saying a simple sentence to a fourth grader, right? We
yeah,
raised the culture survey from 20 to 90%, right? That's something that you can hang your hat on.
yeah,
And an example of how you can use those outcomes to your
yeah,
advantage for the next role. You touched on it, so we're just going to dive into it. AI. Right?
yeah,
AI tools. So, what are ways that you use AI now? You talked a little bit about how to maybe, and say dumb down, but that's the word you used, but make
yeah,
it simpler, right? If you're going to keep
yeah,
it simple, then let's keep it simple.
yeah.
So that's one way that you use it. What are other ways you use it in your day to day that you found made you more efficient or have helped to develop information or analyze statistics that have been helpful for you?
Yeah. It's a great tool to use Excel. Right? It is a fantastic tool to say, I want to do an index match lookup with these columns. How do I write the formula? And it will spit out that formula and give it to you right away. And so you don't have to sit there and try it and try it and try it and figure it out. That's one way I use it all the time, because I don't use Excel every day.
Mhm.
I'm pretty versed in it, but there's sometimes I forget exactly, okay, how does this comma go? Where's this missing?
Yeah.
Nothing worse than having that red line, squiggly line under the formula, and you're like, what's wrong? Hey, paste that formula into AI, Copilot, whatever you're using, and it will give you the right formula. It will fix it for you. So, that's just a simple way. Getting ideas, right? Like, even an email idea, like, hey, this is my problem. What are some talking points around it? Right. And I'm not saying use it to write your emails and write your papers and do all that, but use it for idea generation. I did my MBA, not finished my MBA not too long ago, and I was stuck on this project, and I just said, well, I'm going to try Copilot. I said, what are some sustainability issues that a local grocery store could use? And it spit out 4 or 5 things. And I'm like, okay, well, I like two of those. So then I did research on those two and wrote my paper about it. So instead of like beating your head against a wall, or, struggling with an assignment that you have, or a task from your supervisor, dive into it and see what they can. Don't be afraid of AI. It's going to be here, and it's going to come with even a stronger vengeance. And if you're not on board and don't know how to use it and don't know how to make it part of your day to day, you're going to be left behind. People are going to start looking for employees who understand AI, aren't afraid of it, and willing to use it.
So for you in the area you're in now, or maybe in areas that you
Mhm.
want to explore in the future, what are some, we'll say, transformations or evolutions of AI that you see on the horizon that will help the day to day person in a working environment?
I think Copilot's going to be amazing. I'm not a Microsoft fan, but they're doing some pretty cool stuff with Copilot. I just demoed the paid part of Copilot, where you can literally have a data set and say, I want to analyze this data, give me all the um, you know, strong, leaning, satisfied comments or something along those lines, or give me an analysis overview of this data, and it will spit it out for you. Take this data and give me a PowerPoint presentation that highlights the top 5 sales areas, right? It's going to do that for you. Now, you can't just go present that, right? You're still going to have to do your homework, right? It's helping you get to the end result, but you still have to prepare and understand what's in there. And, I think sometimes people think AI is just going to replace us. And well, in some ways it may. I think it's going to make us a lot more efficient. and you can't trust everything it does, right? Like I've typed some things in and what it's spit out has not been factual, right? And you're like, okay, well, if I were to present that, I would look like an idiot.
Right.
And so you have to use it in caution. But I think by far, I think in getting good data analytics quick or getting it into a presentation quick, I think Copilot's going to be by far the best at doing that. Changing a tone of an email. I think that's a phenomenal use of AI. Does this email sound attacking? Make this email sound more professional. I use that. My emails are short. I get a lot. And so sometimes I'm just firing off responses. And I've learned now to take a pause and say, ask AI, does this email sound abrasive? Make this email sound less abrasive. And it may be just changing 2 or 3 words in it, but it's that kind of check to say, am I going to make this recipient mad by sending this email? Yeah, right. And because there's no tone, people aren't going to know how you're doing it. But like, how can we get so using it in those ways? I think are great and beneficial. I've seen people use it to do their entire job. I think that's horrible. You're cheating the system, just like school. If you cheat, you're not going to advance because you're going to be called out eventually because someone's going to question something in a presentation or something you're presenting, and you're not going to know the answer, and you're going to look like, what is this person doing? They don't know what they're talking about, right? And so you can't 100% rely on it, but to get to a point or to help you do a project or figure something out, I think it's phenomenal.
Yeah. And this goes into a lot of your style as well, thinking through, okay, does this message, this email, whatever this is, does this sound abrasive? Right.
Mhm.
If your goal in these communications, whether it's with your employees or with potential clients or current clients, is to build that relationship, the last thing you want to do is come across in a
Yep.
certain tone
Yeah.
unknowingly or
Yep.
accidentally. Right.
Yep.
So I think that's a great way to use the tool
Yeah.
to your advantage. So,
Yeah. And even responding, like there's a lot of things that happen at this company operationally. And, I never, one of the things we do is assuming positive intent, right? Always assume that the other person is not doing something to hurt you or harm you. And, that goes a long way. And even in an email, is there something I can do to make this not happen in the future? Is there a way I need to do this differently? Like taking even if you did everything right, just asking the question, hey, is there something I need to do differently in the future to prevent this? Makes that person feel like you're more of a team player. You're willing to take some responsibility for something. Like that's important, right? Like don't throw your teammates under the bus. Like that's your team. Take ownership of it. Like you should be defending your team, not throwing your team under the bus, right? Like you shouldn't be backstabbing your colleague because you want their job too. Like that's not going to get you anywhere. Just thinking through those steps and being very strategic in everything you do, right? Another piece, Chris, I want to talk about that's kind of important for self development.
mhm,
I have all but my dissertation done for a doctorate, and I've read lots and lots of leadership books. And there's one piece of advice through every single leadership book that's a trait of leadership, and it's self awareness. And I think that sometimes we aren't self aware of how we interact with others or how our demeanor comes across to others, right? Or how are we doing in our day to day work? And so, I just had a lunch with a colleague the other day who was a former student, and talked about this same thing. Like, are you self aware? Are you aware of how people react when you interact with them? Um, do you reflect on your day to day work? Right, like reflection is a key to success and a key to being self-aware. And I think back, I don't remember the philosopher who said a life without reflection is a life not fully lived. I don't remember if it's Plato or Aristotle, but
it's
one of the philosophers
any of
said that.
them, right?
And it's true. I find myself, I do a very easy reflection at the end of every day, and on my drive to work in the morning. It's, what did I do well today? What didn't I do well today? And how am I going to do better tomorrow? And in the morning, and the way to work is like, okay, I reflect back. This is what I didn't do well yesterday. How am I going to do better with that today? And I remind myself in that drive. I utilize that commute time to improve myself, right? And if I find myself in a rut and I try to figure out why, I quickly realize I'm in a rut because I'm not reflecting. right? And I think that that gets lost in leadership a lot,
Yeah.
and it's an important aspect of your own personal development and your own personal success.
Yeah, most definitely. So, Rob, this has been great. You took us through not only identifying transferable skills and how you can apply them, right, to a career change, a career shift, which is valuable to anybody, right? Even if it's within the same company, even within just tagging on an additional responsibility, right? Again, in a way that's meaningful and does not compromise the work life balance, right?
Yep.
And also part of your tenants here. I think
Yep.
you brought a lot of insight into the uses of AI in the everyday workforce, and that last piece, that self awareness, I will 100% back that reflection. That's something I try to do. I'm not going to say I'm always successful, but I try to reflect on that way, the good, the bad. Sometimes I'll even get into minutia and say, "Oh, have that conversation, that one sentence, that's not exactly what I
Mhm.
wanted to say," and I'm wondering what that person thinks now of me or
Yep.
what I was talking about. So that's all great. So I will ask one final question. Any final words of wisdom you want to share with to be graduates or people that are just trying to find the next step in their careers?
Don't be scared to try new things. All right. I think back to that advice, close your eyes and jump. Sometimes you get in your comfort zone, you get very comfortable. I did this at the university. I wasn't prepared when I left. I was kind of blindsided. And so, always be looking for a job, even if you're extremely happy, right? I probably still do one or two interviews a year. I have
Hmm.
no intentions of leaving where I'm at, but I still do it because I'm not going to be caught blindsided again, right? And if you're not interviewing, you're not throwing out your resume, you're not updating your resume and throwing out cover letters and doing things, you're going to become stale. And then if the time or opportunity happens, I think of all the people that's recently lost jobs because they were remote and companies are going back in and they're not, you live too far away, unfortunately.
Yeah.
That's how do you now you have to hurry up and get everything ready and then go enter the job market. Like, wouldn't it be great to just be able to say, oh, I'm ready. Here's my resumes. Let's start applying. And so, always be looking, always be ready for that next step and always look for the next step. You should always, when you're working somewhere, I'm often asked, where are you going to be in 3 years or 5 years? And my answer is always the same. I don't know. It's going to be based on what I feel my skill set can do the best for the company and in what role will that be? And if that opportunity comes up and I feel it's a fit, I'm going to take it. I'm not going to say I'm going to be a VP in 5 years. I may or may not, but
Right.
my goal is to make sure where I'm going to be happy providing my skill set, doing the work I like to do, and being ready to make that step when it comes.
Yeah. Yeah. If you stay ready, you're always ready. Right.
Yeah,
And that's
yeah,
that's the job market. You can think you apply that to a lot of things, but I think in the job market it does get lost, right? In the shuffle,
yeah,
people just get content, they get stagnant, they get complacent. They think they have got the next 3 to 5 years figured out. And I think that I don't know mentality, while people may think that seems like you're just not planning or you're not aware, it's
yeah,
the reality, right? I don't know because I'm unsure and my
yeah,
skills may be needed in a place that I never imagined. So
yeah. And it's not
that's
that I'm
great.
not thinking about it, right? I'm
Yeah.
thinking about it, but I just don't know. I don't plan that far ahead because anything can happen. And, I don't want to pigeonhole myself. I just had lunch last week with the senior vice president and I said, I'm looking for my next step and it's going to be one of these four areas. I don't know what it's going to be yet, but these are the four areas I'm looking at.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Well, Rob, thanks again. Appreciate it. This has
Yep.
been a great conversation for anybody looking to enter sales or looking for a transition in their life. They will 100% find value in this conversation. And
Okay.
you all can find value in this conversation and all of the others. And stay tuned for the next episode of Classroom to Corner Office Career Talks with Chris.